See you soon, ladies.
I think we should be live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Natalia Holm. I'm the Climate Risk and Water Stewardship Service Line Lead at Intake Group USA, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I'll go over a few housekeeping items. We want this to be an interactive session, so if you have any questions or comments, please submit them through the Q&A tab on your screen. For the best audio quality, be sure to turn your volume up. And if you're experiencing any problems, refreshing your screen should help. Or you can try exiting and rejoining the webinar. An on-demand version of the session will be available 1 to 2 hours after today's broadcast. So you should receive an email notifying you that the recording is available, but it can also be accessed using the same link that you received in your email when you registered. And now to introduce our presenters for today's session. I'm so happy to be joined by two of my wonderful colleagues, Janaína Silva, who is the water engineer at Antia Group Brazil. Hi, Janaína.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
And Nadia Jabour, who's the head of International Sustainability Services at Antia Group France. Thank you for being here, Nadia.
Hello, bonjour everyone.
And as I mentioned, I lead Intake Group USA's Climate Risk and Water Stewardship Service Line. All three of us have worked together very closely on international water stewardship projects over the years, and all three of us are also accredited specialists with the Alliance for Water Stewardship. So very excited for our discussion today. Let's start with a warm-up question. We all work with different geographies, across different industries. Any opening remarks on the state of water stewardship globally? What are the main water-related challenges that companies are currently facing? What are you hearing from your clients? Nadia, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Natalia, for the introduction. Once again, hello, everyone. So yes, we're hearing a lot of things, of course, on water-related challenges, on different aspects, but maybe one that has struck me a bit more recently, in the past 1 to 2 years, is actually more and more our clients are really wondering about the actual water sustainability of an area where they operate. Basically, they have in some places, they have some factory, some plant, and they're coming to us to me saying, hey, do you think we can keep our factory there because of water resources, because of water sustainability? Is there enough water for everyone, for us, but also for potable water, for agriculture, basically? Are we at risk for quantity, quality, reputational? So should we keep a factory there, or should we think about relocating in the medium term? So it's quite strong, questioning, because it has a lot of implication, of course. And it's really about business survival. And along with that, we accompany a lot of our clients, basically, who want to set up a new site in a water sustainable area. Because before, new factories are built up, in an area that makes sense from a logistic point of view, road, access to labor, depending on the country where we work, because this question can come from Asia, Africa, Europe, South America. And they have built sometime, we have unfortunately bad cases of some factories, brand new factories, or new technology built up, state of the art, but actually no water to run that factory, because they didn't make sure that there was sufficient water to run that factory. So now more and more the clients ask us, please find us an area where we think there's enough water now and tomorrow, taking into account climate change, to ensure that we're not impacting the population, the agriculture, and we can be, business sustainability here related to water. So that really strikes me as now a top question when looking at new location. That's
Absolutely.
my take for this intro.
Yeah, no, I mean, water is a business critical resource, right? Regardless of what industry you're in. Janina, what about you? What are you hearing?
Here in Latin America, what I've seen, it's that the conversation around water stewardship is definitely evolving. So we are talking more about this subject. So we are seeing a growing number of companies incorporating basin level interventions into their long-term planning. So this is what we have seen so far. And I would say the main challenges I hear from our clients today would be first, the increasing pressure on shared water sources, particularly in areas where watershed governance is weak or maybe fragmented. Second, I would say that it's a lack of reliable data. Yeah, we are still dealing with this challenge. So if we don't have reliable data, it makes it difficult for us, even harder that already is, to assess the risks, to plan for future scenarios, and even measure the effectiveness, if it's working or not, the actions that our clients are putting in place. And third, I would say that it's when companies are willing to act beyond their operations. So they often encounter barriers to engaging with its stakeholders, its external stakeholders. This happens due to unclear responsibilities, lack of trust. This is what happens most: lack of trust, or simply not knowing where to begin. So we have this, and also we have another challenge that I would say that it's becoming more visible for us, is the difficulty in creating meaningful indicators to track progress in water stewardship. So it seems easy, but we have to create indicators that are smart, that we can measure, we can compare, and that are truly useful. So most of the companies that come to us, they are having a hard time creating these indicators, so they can use to plan, to make decisions. And when you consider water stewardship, it's even more difficult, because it's a complex scenario when you consider the watershed, right? So I would say those are the main challenges. But at the same time, we are seeing some momentum. So scenario, we have the challenges, but also we have this positive vision of the whole scenario, because it's growing. The momentum is growing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, water is the ultimate shared resource, but it also is such a complex system, and solving the water crisis is going to have to require a multifaceted solution. Well, those are great insights. Thank you both for sharing your perspective. Something I've definitely observed working at the intersection of climate risk and water stewardship lately is that shift from companies thinking about water as a material or non-material reporting metric to their business, to really thinking about water as a business necessity, a shared resource, and a business risk. So let's dive a little deeper into each area that we've discussed so far. Maybe we can start with facility and corporate level action, and then talk more about the basin level actions. So Nadia, one of the things you mentioned was difficulties companies are having with business continuity planning. Can you speak to how you've approached these conversations, and what solutions have you been recommending for companies that choose to continue operating in water stressed areas?
Yeah, sure. Of course, the response really depends on which country we're working on, and which, specificity of every operation, every catchment, But of course, when possible, it's better if we're in a really water stress to try to find an alternate place. So relocation is really something that, companies sometimes are considering. But of course, sometimes it is not possible for different reasons. There needs to be a business continuity in those water stress area. So when it's the case, there could be different level that could occur to trying to continue to operate in this area while basically having minimal impact, or trying to help the situation as much as possible. For example, there could be where a company, couple of our clients, basically to even stay in the same zone, the same factory, to find an alternate source. Basically, for example, to go to use a deeper aquifer. a deeper groundwater. That's the one that's not used by the local population, agriculture, but it's an alternate source, maybe more expensive, but that's one that that is not used because it's deeper and has a bit more cost to go to catch it, let's say. But it's an investment because in return it's not impacting the other users, secure the water supply, and make sure that the more accessible water is as a priority for potable use for some population. And then also what can really be done, and a lot of industries are doing that, actually, not all of them, but as Janaina said, there's more and more momentum, which is great, to have more stringent targets when you operate in those water stress area. Of course, because you're in an area where that value of water is even more important, so there needs to be more action to it. So if it's at site level, of course, is to have like targets that are higher in terms of recycling, reuse, basically to see how much effort you can do to really minimize your water footprint on that area, trying to maybe put more technology, more cost into it, but to trying really to think outside the box to really improve as much as possible the targets related on the water use. So that's one of them, that can be done. And of course, it could be also thinking outside the factory, but I think we'll talk about it later, but having commitments towards helping the catchment also outside the factory by replenishment, by balancing actions, and having those targets for those water stress area. So basically, it's lead by example and go beyond, because they're operating in a water stress area. It's really to protect the water source for everyone, including the factories, to making sure that basically there's sufficient water now and tomorrow for everyone. Because if you do the best things at your site level, sometimes it's not sufficient. You really need to take into account the catchment, and we'll talk a bit about it later.
Yeah, very good.
Absolutely. One of the first things I learned in water stewardship is the concept of a healthy fish in a dry pond.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, another perspective that has also been coming up quite a bit is the consumer element. With a growing consumer awareness of both environmental issues, water use has really become a visible marker for corporate sustainability. So, question for you both: have you observed corporate clients responding to consumer concerns about water? Janina, maybe you can take this first.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yes. Although I would say we are still in the early stages of that shift. In Latin America, we are beginning to see more companies paying more attention on how water-related issues are perceived by their consumers, especially in sectors like food and beverages, where water is closely tied to the product's identity and also public trust. Some of our clients are now including water stewardship more explicit in their sustainability communication and also ESG reporting, showing that they are taking responsibility beyond just internal water efficiency. It's just like Nadia said. So that said, the connection between consumer expectations and corporate water action is still developing. There is a real opportunity here for companies to build strong trust through transparency and long-term commitment as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Janina. Nadia, what about you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Janina, and I would add maybe that from my perspective, it's water is really more and more important for consumers. Consumers do care about water and the water footprint and where that water is being used. And to date, or to recent, it's true that in the mind of consumers, it was really about carbon. Basically, carbon footprint was really on the top, priority, and hence a lot of, corporate clients were really industries trying to make the most action about it, so that was very, very important. But we can see that more and more water is rising. There's actually studies, surveys happening where we can see that consumers have more and more interest into the water. That's the components in the product that they eat, drink, consume, use, basically. Quality seems so far to be a bit more a concern over quantity, but I think quickly it's going to become both, very likely. So they really that there's a shift, I think, in those perception, and corporate clients are seeing that. So they really want more and more to have actions related to water stewardship, water sustainability that are, having an impact, even if they already done in the past, but that can be visible too. Actions that are, that the consumer can see that they are doing actions. So by having, a strong water strategy plan, by having, like commitments to AWS, I'm sure we'll talk about that very soon, by, having things that, have a sense and are visible, for the uh, for everyone, basically. Yeah,
Mhm.
being transparent.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's definitely something I'm seeing as well. Consumer concerns, I think, also tie very closely to another topic that's been dominant lately, and that's where companies are the consumer. So they're looking to manage water risk in their own supply chains. They want to ensure not only business resilience in their own operations within their four walls, but also make sure that their suppliers are reliable. Nadia, how are you seeing water stewardship addressed in the supply chain water risk management?
Well, it's becoming more and more a subject. It's not fully addressed, let's say, but definitely in the supply chain is first. I think in a lot of places, it's the first step would be to understand the supply chain and the risk related to water in the supply chain. So that's really, I think, once again, if I do the parallel with carbon, if you look at scope one, scope two, like people know how much water they're using and what's the risk related to the own operation. But when we look at scope three, so basically all that water that, if we do the parallel, that water that's coming from the supply chain, from, harvesting different foods and using different type of waters, basically it's hidden, like it's not as obvious. So the first risk is the first step is to understand it, which is already a big step. And then the second one is really to be able to, and a lot of companies are doing it more and more, basically to be more stringent with their supply chain, basically being able to select like suppliers that actually really have actions towards water. So there's different way to do that, of course. For example, to us that all supply chain are doing AWS certification. They could be, a big step is really at the procurement level, because when those companies are basically selecting suppliers, they could ask, basically, like they could be forms that, classic one, EcoVadis and others, but it could be also things that are tailored, basically saying, we need to understand you what to use, what are you doing about water, different things that, the suppliers need to fill. And by doing that, of course, when you touch to finance, it's always a way to motivate. So basically, if there's an approach to say we select suppliers that actually are doing efforts, are doing things, and being transparent about water, even if they're in progress, basically, but they are working on it, compared to other suppliers that don't give an F, basically, we prefer to work with those, and that really is a motivation. So there's different leverage that can occur. It is, not only finance, but that's one that more and more some companies are applying, and it's actually working. So
Absolutely. I really like your analogy to scopes one, two, and three and carbon. And that's something, a piece of advice I've been giving to clients lately as well, is start integrating water into the same sustainable procurement policies that you already have in place. Janina, how are you seeing supply chain impacts?
Nadia spoke very well on the subject. What I can do is to talk a little bit about what I've seen here in Brazil and Latin America. Um, so we've seen that supply chain water risk is becoming a more visible concern, especially in agriculture. And but what happened is many companies are still in the early stages. We don't have much to work with. It's still right at the beginning. They're trying to understand where their water risks actually are, how exposed their suppliers might be, and what they can do about it. So we are still at the beginning, right? A lot of space to grow. Some option, for example, what can they do, right? And based on what we have seen, They can offer technical support. They can share good practices. They can co-invest in solutions like improved irrigation, maybe improved soil management, or even in some water reuse systems. Some of our clients are also partnering with NGOs or maybe universities to deliver training to their suppliers and providing tools to them so they can manage water in a better way. The important thing that we understood is that we need to move from transactional relationships with the suppliers to collaborative ones, and show them that water stewardship is shared responsibility. It's not just something that it has been pushed top down, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So much agreement here. Um, One of the ways, and Nadia mentioned this already, one of the ways we're seeing companies address those consumer concerns is through site level certification. All three of us work very closely with the Alliance for Water Stewardship to support companies through that certification process or within their supply chain. So, Janina, let's talk about clients pursuing AWS. What's the added value? What do the facilities gain by implementing the standard?
Okay, very good. Good question. I think at the beginning of this answer, I need to say that we have a difference here. We need to separate the value of applying the AWS standard from the value of pursuing the certification itself. So by applying the AWS standard, facilities gain a structured, practical framework to understand their water use, the water context, assess the risks, engage stakeholders, and plan meaningful actions, both inside the fence and at the basin level. It helps also, this is very interesting, it helps connect different departments inside the facilities, like the operations and EHS, sustainability, compliance, and it turns water from a technical issue into a strategic priority. So now when companies decide to go further and pursue certification, they gain external recognition and credibility. A certification as well, certification shows that the facility is not just managing water responsibly, but doing so in a way that it's auditable, transparent, and it is aligned with global best practices. So in short, I would say the standard helps you to do the work, and the certification to prove that you do it in a aligned with the best practices.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you calling out the difference between just implementation and actually proceeding with certification. Nadia, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think Janina made a perfect answer and very thorough. I would just say, in my view, basically, as she sums up, basically, it's a recognition. So it helps with, being like a proper way to do an action that's being seen and recognized by people. And it's also a really good guidance to help companies who don't know where to start. Sometimes they want to do action, they don't want to do action, have an impact, but they don't know where to start. So it helps with that, real standard, basically, to follow a process. So it's very important and helpful.
Yeah, it's well polished. It's a great framework to help companies and individual sites to really structure a water stewardship strategy around those measurable impacts. What I really appreciate that is, as Janina mentioned, that certification requires both site level and basin level components and actions. So I'm certainly seeing increased interest and new players in the field seeking to engage in collective action projects. So maybe we can shift gears to that. We know that collective action and that stakeholder engagement are really critical to addressing shared water challenges. What themes are you seeing in both where companies are succeeding or maybe struggling with basin level engagement? Nadia, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, well, that's a big subject, for sure. Because, of course, stakeholder engagements, collective actions. It can be from different, frameworks and standards that companies have. They could be because they have committed to doing water balancing, water replenishment. It could be because they're doing science-based targets or others commitment. But basically, it's about okay, what's happening at a watershed level? How can we find meaningful projects and action with other stakeholders? And so what's the part that is struggling and succeeding is goes hand by hand, because from experience of working with several clients, on this type of project, basically what's really important and what's difficult also, and some can be a bit scary for the site, is, basically how to go to see those stakeholders, how to communicate with them, because it's a bit something that when you work on your site, you manage it, your employees, your protocols and stuff like that. But when you go outside, and you're going to see other stakeholders who's got other priorities, than yours. It's about finding a common language, common goals, and building trust. And I think Junaida mentioned that earlier, which is really paramount. If there's no trust, basically we can forget about collaborative action. So that's part of really the challenge. So basically being honest about the approach and building trust, it's a key part, because in some areas might be more difficult than others. I can see, for example, France, collaborative actions with industrials is still thing like, about the greenwashing and bluewashing. It's not something it's happening more and more, but, there's a bit of a defiance. Whereas in some other country where we work, for example, like India, there's way more projects already going on, and it's like really welcome. So, basically you need to adapt about, so the specifics of the countries and the way things are working, and building that trust once again is very important. So basically it's important to have the right person to help in that process. It could be internal, it could be external, consultant NGOs, could be internal with somebody dedicated to it. But often what we find is when there's a site who's got that task to do it, they don't have the time, unfortunately. If the corporate hasn't assigned a new person to help them, it could be somebody from the company, but people who's got already their, HEC targets and all of that, they don't have maybe that time or the training to go and speak with stakeholders. So often it helps to have somebody who to mediate basically and be able to navigate between the different stakeholders, finding those common language and common goals. And sometimes the struggle is, as mentioned, the same language because and same goals, because sometimes they could be projects on the long term, some on the short term. It's not everybody's the same agenda. So basically it's finding something that could address the issue of the watershed by working with different stakeholders at the same pace. And it's a challenge, let's face it. Sometimes it's very difficult, but it's working too. So basically it's about finding the right momentum, the right person, and the right projects also. So that's really important. That would be my take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like your phrasing of success and struggle go hand in hand.
Yes.
And reaching that trust is so hard, especially because trust requires some level of transparency. So before you even go talk to the stakeholders, you have to go through the internal hurdles and get your PR on board and get your legal on board. And it takes a whole journey just to get to that point as well. Janina, what about you? What are you seeing in terms of successes and struggles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First, Nadia, thank you for your perspective. It's really close to what we face here in Latin America. So we have seen companies more willing than ever to engage beyond their operations, but they often they face challenges, and when they try to do, they don't do it effectively, right? It doesn't work that well. No, we don't have the results that were expected. So where companies succeed, so we have some cases that succeed and others that don't. So when they succeed, what they usually do is they had time to build trust. It wasn't something that it started really fast, like in 6 months, a year. They had time to know the need of the stakeholders. They built trust. They listened to the concerns. They engaged already in the spaces, the existing spaces. So this is a very good way to start, like being part of river basin committees or partnerships already in place with NGOs or maybe universities. We've also seen success when companies have dedicated internal teams responsible for stakeholder relationship, not just during like a period of a project, but as part of the facility's long-term commitment. So this was one example. But on the other hand, when companies fail, they tend to struggle when the engagement is seen as a one-off activity. They just appear in the middle of the stakeholders with an idea and try to engage. So that doesn't work. Or when they don't have a clear understand of the local dynamics, the community, or maybe the committee, and also other stakeholders. In those cases, the relationships are often too fragile. It's too new, too fragile to create real impact. So another common challenge is trying to align actors with different priorities and timeframes, because we have different stakeholders. They operate in different timeframes. For example, if we are talking about the governmental agency and the private sector, that operate in different timeframes. So this is something that we have to address, trying to engage with this type of stakeholders. So I would say companies that approach engagement as long-term investment in relationships and shared outcomes tend to make more the most meaningful progress in the engagement in the basin level.
Oh, thank you, Janaina. Great perspective, and I completely agree. The relationship building piece of the collective action projects is really the make it or break it. One thing I'll add is that we have a lot of great lessons learned that have been shared by companies that have been on this journey for a while. I'll call out the beverage industry. There are great examples and case studies available from those leaders in the space. And also the Alliance for Water Stewardship Forum that's coming up in June is a great platform where those case studies and lessons learned are shared by companies that have pursued and achieved certification. So there's a lot we know about the successes and failures already, but in your opinion, what tools do we still need in the water space to more effectively enable collective action? Janaina, we'll start with you.
Okay, it's a very important question, and I think I talked about them in the before, but I'll bring it again. So sometimes we have the companies want to collaborate, but they often lack the right conditions, right, to make it effective. One of the biggest gaps that I can share is that lack of data, right? I mentioned this before, but if we don't have like good accessible data at the basin level, we cannot create a common understanding of the water context. So it becomes very hard to align priorities and coordinate actions. So this will be the first one. And I think we also need better platforms for dialogue, like spaces that go beyond compliance or project-specific meetings, where the stakeholders can build trust, they can build a long-term partnership. So, we are lacking this space. Another important piece is the need for simple, practical tools to help not only the companies, but local actors to evaluate impact. Share goals, monitor progress in a transparent way. So sometimes they don't have access to this kind of information, this kind of tool. So we need to think on a way to address this. And finally, I think we need more support for local capacity building. So as well. We don't have the tools, but also we don't have the capacity building. Many communities and institutions, they want to engage, but they don't have how, the technical resources or maybe the financial support to do it. So I would say that we need tools that are not just technical, but also institutional, social, maybe relational.
Mm. So speed dating, but for companies and stakeholders and implementers.
That would be awesome.
Let's trademark that. Nadia, what tools do you think we're still missing?
Well, I completely agree with both of you and Elena. Thank you for that global view. What I could add, maybe from the view of, because I work a lot on water balancing, water replenishment project, collaborative actions at the basin level. What's missing is maybe from the audience, I don't know who's familiar with it, but a lot of companies still, when they do this type of project, they need to align with a certain methodology, because otherwise you can just do some projects and it could be completely disconnected from the need of the watershed. It could be and so we have there's a methodology that's known as the volumetric benefit accounting methodology, that basically looks at how much the collaborative project is impacting in terms of volume, how much cubic meter basically it is helping the watershed by different actions depending on the project. But it's a volumetric approach, and it's the one that to date a lot of companies are using because it's been vetted and approved by several entities, and it's a great one, but it's focused on volumetric. And at the moment, there's new methodology coming up also to take into account more like the qualitative impact, more the social impact, some other basically benefits that at the moment are not as clear as the volumetric. So I think if we can really broaden and have like a global methodology of the benefits of those collaborative projects, not only on volume, that would be really interesting and really good, because sometimes to be able to follow that methodology, we maybe not take into, we don't choose some project because they don't have the right volume benefits basically, but they could have many other great benefits, and at the moment we cannot quantify them, so they're not selected. But so if it could be a methodology basically taking all the benefits, and that could be a renowned one and accredited one, that would be really great, because I think it would broaden the type of project, and not have that conversation I had sometime with some of the stakeholders. Your project is great, but from a volume point of view, sorry, it's not matching what we're looking, and it's a bit too bad. But at the moment, that's a reality, So it's to see how it could be broadened and have more impact. That would be great. That's what's missing for me at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And while those methodologies are in development, there still needs to be a good way to actually reflect those co-benefits and how they all interact and build off of each other as well. And that's hard to quantify even with a framework in place. Well, thank you for those perspectives. That was so helpful. Since both of you work with basin level water stewardship initiatives, maybe you could share examples that involve basin level water stewardship initiatives, multiple stakeholders, and delivered measurable results. Janina, we can start with you. And you're muted. We still can't hear you.
Wait.
There you are.
Yes. So since Nadia talked about the methodology that measures everything in volume, that reminds me of a project that we have done with one of our clients, and it was in southern Brazil, and they implemented a payment for environmental services. They created this program to support water stewardship at the basin level. The company, our client, partnered with local farmers, with municipal authorities, and environmental organizations to create an initiative that financially supports uh, landowners who protects the springs and riparian vegetation on their properties. So the project started in 2019, and by 2023, the program had already engaged 100 farmers and protected more than 120 springs and covered over 220 hectares of critical land. So this is the result. What makes this initiative stand out for me is that combines nature-based solutions, community involvement, and also measurable hydrological outcomes. So we can really see the results of all the actions. So we used the volumetric water benefit accounting methodology, and the company has been able to report over plus 60,000 cubic meters per year of water benefits. So it is a strong science-based contribution to share water security. So this is one of examples that we have of water stewardship actions on base level.
Am I also muted?
Yeah, so I was going to say, sorry, I can't hear you, Natalia. What were you saying?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just saying it's so encouraging to see the real life positive impacts that are taking place and being implemented around the world. Nadia, do you have examples to share?
Yeah, for sure. But great example from Janaina. And what I try to do is give another example, very different, because sometimes you have those beautiful projects, 100 farmers, and very, if I'd say, like positive, like visual project that has very strong impacts and co-benefits. So that's great. I'll give an example of a very different, a small project, because small project can have also a very, very powerful impact. I would take an example of an area where there's a small village, basically, where there's a spring, quite a big spring that overflows naturally, but a big part of it goes underground, actually, the overflow, and feeds basically the natural hydro system. And in this area, there's a sewage network system that was in place going to the wastewater treatment plant. And because those pipelines were quite faulty, basically a lot of that spring water was actually feeding into that sewage pipeline, basically, and being directed to the wastewater treatment plant. So here they had multiple issues. Basically, a good spring water quality was disconnected from the natural system, and that water was going to the wastewater treatment plant, overloading it with clear water. So it's like parasitic water, having a strong dilution. So it was like 300-400% of the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant. Huge electricity bill, huge problem of being able to treat this water. And so basically, by just redoing that pipeline, relining it, basically to not be able to, so that spring water was not going into it, and water really managed to flow back to the natural environment, and the pipeline was catching only wastewater, and the wastewater is now treatment plant is now working perfectly fine. It has involved several stakeholders, like with the mayor, with the council, with the engineering, like companies working on a wastewater treatment plant, and with the volumetric water benefit accounting, it's like about 180,000 cubic meters that were, basically proven to be helped with that project. So there's a lot of different type of project, and sometimes big project can be scary for sometimes a bit for industries, like, so they can be meaningful and they really have their importance, and sometimes they can be also small project, maybe a bit less sexy because it's working on wastewater treatment plants, but it can have also a very good effect. So there's a wide range of potential projects. So we need to see what's what matter with and what's important for the local context.
Absolutely. I love that sentiment that even small projects can have a big impact, and it might be a very simple technical solution that's quite a bit cheaper than doing a multi-year basin action and still achieve really positive impacts. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time. So I want to take a moment for some closing remarks and bring everything we talked about together. An important topic to us in the water world is circularity. Nadia, last time we spoke, you mentioned the concept of big and small water cycles and bringing them together. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. I go often about that. But so a small cycle of water is a drop of water that enters and exits a site, a factory, and the whole process in it. So basically, you can do a lot of action that small cycle, optimize it, what to use, reuse, recycle, basically work on the CIP, different things you can work basically to improve what you can do on that small cycle. And the big cycle is where that drop of water come from and where it goes back into the catchment. So that's at catchment level, surface water, groundwater, and all the issues and potential problematic that they can be in quantity, quality, over there. So to date, often we worked with our clients on those topics relatively separately. We had team dedicated to the small cycle of water. We had team dedicated to the big cycle of water because it's the even at the client level, it's different approach, different teams inside those companies. But more and more, what is changing actually, and our clients are asking an integrated, basically, studies that look at small cycle and big cycle because it's all linked, of course. It's the same drop of water. So where to see really where we can have actions and impact and have a proper water circularity approach. So it's a global view and not just being focused in one area, but take the big picture of what can be done at site level and catchment level. It cannot be disconnected. It should not be disconnected anymore. So it's important to see that global approach, small cycle, big cycle, and how we can work together on that.
That's phenomenal. It's so great to see water finally being perceived as a more holistic system. Janina, how are you seeing clients integrating that holistic thinking into water stewardship? And you're on mute.
Someone is doing that to me. I swear. It's not me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, many of our clients, they're starting to adopt a more holistic approach to water, not just looking at consumption, reuse inside the facility, but also understanding their role in the broader hydrological and social context. We are seeing growing efforts to integrate water stewardship with other subjects like land use, agriculture, climate resilience, and community engagement. And what would that be? For example, working with farmers to improve infiltration and protect recharge areas, maybe support restoration of degraded riparian zones. Um, that benefit both the watershed and also the local population. And there's also a shift in mindset from a water being a resource to be controlled to being a shared system to be sustained. So I like that very much. So I would say holistic thinking is gaining momentum as well, and it is creating space for more meaningful and collaborative water strategies.
Absolutely. And I'll go back to something you said at the beginning of our session. For me, it's so encouraging to hear that there's a shift happening from reactive to proactive strategies. And that's certainly helping reinforce that importance of integrating the local watershed dynamics and enterprise risk assessments and really emphasize the long term resilience for both the businesses and the communities. And that requires not just that internal water efficiency, but real collaborative and community based water stewardship. Well, we have just a little over 10 minutes left in our broadcast. So we'll open it to questions as I don't see any questions immediately in the chat. So maybe I'll start out with one of my questions. there have been some very serious greenwashing lawsuits that have recently come up in the media. And when companies want to brand themselves as water stewards, how do you work with them to ensure they're not blue washing their commitments or their impacts?
Well, that's a very important question. I'll answer briefly, and I can pass on to Janaina. But basically, that's a very important part, because there's some great action that can occur. Like, some industry clients want to have a positive impact, and it's important that it's not being seen as greenwashing, because the clients I work with, they really want to have a positive impact, and that's why they use existing methodology. That's why for example, they use the volumetric water benefit accounting, because at the moment it's the only methodology that is really agreed by everyone, let's say. So that's why they focus on that, because at least they know that it's been going to be reviewed by peers, by committees, and that ensure that the claim, let's say, of volumetrics are based on scientific data. So that's why they use only this methodology to date for most of them, because they want to ensure, and that's what we recommend to date, use this methodology, because at least it's something that that's been followed and recognized. And it's important to not disconnect some action. Working with one of my clients, who basically is a big group. They have a small site in France, and that site in France has done several actions on its own, not being part of any replenishment or any actions that were part of the group. But now they have been asked, okay, that those actions don't match with any methodologies or anything. So how can we make sure it's not going to be accused of blue washing? So that's where we really try to accompany with. Follow a process, meet the right people with the right stakeholders, have an open conversation, and follow a methodology. That's
Yeah, that's great. Janaina, anything to add?
Yeah, this is something we are paying very close attention to, and what we do, we encourage our clients to do, to focus on being transparent, when presenting data, that it has to be traceable, it has to be traceability, and maybe, if possible, be third party validated. So this is what we have said to our client. That means setting clear, measurable goals, reporting publicly on progress, and when possible, we can also use independent frameworks like AWS standard to ensure that the work is credible and auditable.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janaina. We did get an audience question. As potable reuse becomes more popular, what are the biggest challenges that entities are facing in implementing this strategy?
Well, there's a lot of challenges, but the biggest one, I would say, is still public perception. That reuse is still there's a lot of challenges, not the only one, of course, but public's perception is still, evolving, because I think the state of water and water crisis is not at such a stage that people think it's that needed. But whenever there's a reuse of water, people are a bit scared of it, even if it's reused water to use in the toilets, reused water, not even for drinking. I'm not even talking yet about that, which maybe we're going to do one day, of course. But just for the common approach, it scares people, humans, in general. So there's a public perception that really needs to shift. And I think it goes also with regulation. Like, some countries have really moved way beyond, because they had to do it. Like, of course, Israel or some others that really reuse a lot of water. Whereas in some other countries, because we are a bit more at the moment cautious, like in France, reuse water is really limited to certain use, because until it's validated from a health point of view, nobody wants to take the risk, basically, even if there's best technology in place. So regulation needs to improve also, and allow more reuse, whenever it's not in contact with food components and things like that, for cleaning and things like as such. And in France, it's evolving very quickly at the moment, which is great. And also, I think it's then a matter of, industry standards also to allow basically more and more reuse. But the industry is ready, I think, to be able to reuse more and more if it's allowed, basically, and for different process. There's a cost, of course, for the infrastructure to be able to reuse. but it will move forward very quickly. And that's important. For municipalities, it's still a bit more difficult. Of course, reuse, to implement like a full reuse of water, pipe it to agriculture land and things like that. There's a bit of, of course, finance that needs to be mobilized. But in some Arabic countries, like in the Middle East, they are really moving forward towards reuse for agriculture and other use. So things are moving, and they're moving fast, and I hope they're going to move even faster soon.
Absolutely. That's something we're seeing in at least North America as well. We don't necessarily have the regulatory pressures that exist out in other countries, but there is it's a big topic in the public water supply. So I'm based in Colorado, and that's something that I remember years ago. The first wastewater treatment plant tried to do some water recycling on site, and the community was all up in arms about it until the wastewater treatment plant, their solution was literally put a water in an outdoor channel and then reroute it. And somehow the fact that it left the wastewater treatment plant and went through an outdoor channel and back into the plant, that resolved a lot of that public perception of drinking poopy water. So I thought that was a very interesting example too. Another audience question came in that I really like. How do you ensure that water stewardship efforts continue after AWS certification? And maybe, if I may, I'll expand that to AWS certification or collective action projects.
Okay, I can go ahead and answer about the AWS certification. So we have some experience here in Brazil and Latin America with companies that we helped get certified and also go through the surveillance audits. So the companies that are most successful in that tend to have dedicated teams. They have clear KPIs, and they have regular internal meetings to review progress of the water stewardship plan and identify new opportunities. It sounds simple, but it's not everywhere that it works. They also integrate water stewardship into their strategic planning, so it's not treated like a side project, some side project, but it is a part of the core business. And of course, the surveillance audits help keep the process on track. But more importantly, there has to be an internal culture of consistency. Otherwise, it becomes like those houses that are only cleaned when guests are coming over. So everything gets rushed and polished right before the audit. That's not sustainable. And water stewardship is about long-term commitment and ongoing action. It's not preparing for a visit.
Absolutely. Nadia, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that, the answer to Janaina did is perfect. I won't add anything to that.
Perfect. Well, there's actually a related question as well. We heard about the upcoming changes in the WSAS audit process. What can facilities that have been preparing for certification anticipate?
Yeah, Nadia, if you don't mind, I can answer
Go
this
ahead.
one.
I think you're the best person to answer to that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Let's go ahead. I'll go ahead. So a webinar was held October last year to introduce the updates to the audit process. And these changes officially came into effect April 1st. One key change is that we no longer have the distinction between minor and major nonconformities. Now there are simply nonconformities and observations. All nonconformities must be addressed within 90 days from the closing meeting of the audit. Previously, the facilities had 90 days to address major findings and submit an action plan for the minors, counted from the delivery of the audit report. So this is a significant procedure shift for us. And Another important change is the elimination of the scoring system. In the past, advanced indicators had point values, and the total score determined whether the site achieved gold or platinum certification. So, under the new model, to achieve gold certification, the facility must comply with all core indicators plus 10 specific advanced indicators. To reach platinum, it must meet all the requirements for gold plus 8 additional specific advanced indicators. So we have more changes, but these, I believe, it's the ones that are going to impact us the most.
Phenomenal. Thank you for that detailed answer. And it looks like we are at time. So, huge thank you to Janina and Nadia for sharing your expertise and time with us today. And for our audience, thank you all for joining. Don't forget, if you want to rewatch this panel or send it to a colleague, it will be available within a couple hours, and you'll receive an email with the link to access the recording. There's also a survey that will pop up as we close the webinar broadcast. So, would like to ask that you complete the survey and give us your feedback so that we can meet your needs better going forward. And finally, I do want to encourage everyone to attend our next webinar, which is a live Q&A session on TRI reporting on Tuesday, May 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find the details on that session in the handouts tab on your screen. And again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend if you have holidays coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.